Thank you, Chairwoman. And thank you for the Chair Michael Benedetto and Ms. Meyer, the Chair of the Senate Education Committee, in your leadership. And I think you did a great job of summarizing, difficult to do the entire total budget that was placed in front, but you did a good job of summarizing it. And I want to thank all of the committee members for what I think is going to be a lot of hard work and dedication in making sure we get it right from this conference committee and get out a great budget for the education across this state and our schools in New York State. What I'd like to do is, because I know you summarized it, no sense going over what we see as the funding in there, is just talk a little bit about transparency and just a cautionary note. We got a tremendous amount of funding from the federal government, which is unbelievably important to us right now during this pandemic. We finally got that foundation aid in the level which it should have been at a long time ago. And we want to sustain it and go through these 3 years and make sure it completes and continues to be full foundation aid according to what the courts have dictated. And I know the chairwoman discussed being in sync with the Assembly and the Senate, and that's great. But I just want to remind everybody, we've been in sync before in the past. And you might remember not too many years back, some of you were not here, but some of you were here, we had a tremendous deficit. And to be honest, before we got this federal money, we were in a difficult situation as a state. And one of the good things, if there's any good thing you could say about a terrible pandemic, which took so many lives, is we got some important funding, which kind of bailed us out in a whole variety of ways. And it's being used in a whole variety of ways, and it should be used in a whole variety of ways. But at that point when we had the deficit, if you remember, and we were looking for places to cut, I think you all know what the answer was to where we went. We went to where the money was. We went to education. And I think we all agree now that was not the right thing to do at that time. It took us a tremendous amount of time and work and negotiating together to get through that gap and finally close that gap. And now we're at a place where we've closed that gap with our schools and we've got full foundation aid. And I just want to talk about a little bit for a moment about transparency now.
But just to remind you, we have a hard cutoff so the next committees go, 3 o'clock, just FYI.
Sure. The point I'm trying to make with transparency is that these school districts need to know when this funding is coming forth, because they're discussing that with me. Is it ancillary money for a one-time usage, couple-year usage? Can we tell them to the best of our ability how much of this money is probably going to be ongoing for them to continue to be using for policy and programs? Because when you build in policy and programs, or they use the money for policy and programs, and they're not notified, this money came from the federal government. You can use it maybe for a policy or program that will last for a certain amount of time or a certain level of funding. I think that's important to let them know, because next year, the year after that, unless there's another pandemic or this continues to spin up, we're not going to get that federal money from the federal government. So it's important to be vigilant in understanding and letting them understand what part of this money has a good chance to be ongoing and continue to be funding. And I know we can't be perfect on that. If we were perfect, we wouldn't have done, or the leaders who have done that in the past wouldn't have done what they did to create that huge gap in education. So I think that's the cautionary mention I want to make, and I hope they're notified of exactly the best of our ability, what they can do with that funding and what's ongoing and what's ancillary to one-time usage or just a couple of years maybe. Building in programs that can't be funded are not going to be good for school districts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Tedisco. Thank you for that.